Hey, what's up everybody? So this is going to be a tutorial for accepting payments from your YelpCamp application. In this case, it'll be a registration payment, a one-time payment when a user registers that then allows them to be able to access the functionality of the application, which is of course viewing and creating campgrounds. So if you're to this point in the course, hopefully you'll benefit from this. If you're not and you want to stick around and just kind of learn from what we're doing, that's also fine too. And the first thing you're going to want to do that I'm not going to show you how to do is to sign up for a free Stripe account so that you can get your API keys. Once you are signed up, you can go to your dashboard, go down to developers, click on API keys, get your test keys. You'll have to turn testing on. There's the little toggle icon to turn it to testing, and then copy those keys and put them in your application. We're going to start from this tutorial right here. So stripe.com/docs/payments/accept a payment. By the way, if you can hear me okay, go ahead and type in the comments and let me know. As long as the audio is working good and you can see everything that's on my screen, which in this case is the Chrome browser with the Stripe tutorial, then we're ready to go. So let me know in the comments and then we'll get started. Okay, it looks like one user is able to hear me so far. If you're able to hear the audio okay, just leave a quick comment in the live chat, let me know, and we'll get started in just a second here. Okay, so that's two users that can hear me. I'm assuming that everyone else can, so we're going to go ahead and get started. If you experience any issues with audio or video or anything like that, go ahead and let me know in the live chat. I'll try and monitor that here and there so I can make sure and catch it if we have any technical issues. This is probably going to be a pretty long tutorial. Of course, you can always come back later and watch whatever you get, are unable to finish if you have to go. But yeah, I actually haven't worked through this specific tutorial. What I did previously is I just took the source code from basically what this tutorial produces and then cherry picked it and put it into my YelpCamp application. So I'm familiar with the code, but I haven't gone through it line by line in terms of walking through this tutorial. So we're going to do this together live, and if we experience any issues, we're going to figure them out together. All right, let's get into it. So first things first, if you're just getting here, you're going to want to sign up for Stripe. You can get a free account. Once you're signed up with your developer account, then you'll go into the developers section of the dashboard, and you're going to go to API keys and then change it to test mode and get your public key and your hidden secret key for testing purposes, and you'll use them in this tutorial. And so I'm using version 11 deployed from Colt Steele's YelpCamp from his Web Developer Bootcamp course. You can find that, let's see here, it's going to be, yeah, there it is right there, github.com/nax3t/webdevbootcamp. And so if you just clone, you can download the zip or use git to clone this repo, and then inside of YelpCamp, go all the way down, or right here to version 11 deployed. That's the version that I'm using here. And so this is from 3 years ago, so we're going to run into some issues for sure with different npm packages and their current versions. So we're going to work through those together and get this thing up and running. All right, so back over into the tutorial here. Again, this is stripe.com/docs/payments/accept a payment. So accept-a-payment. We have the web column or tab selected, and let's go ahead and get into it. So as an overview, this is what we're going to be building. This little component right here is basically what's going to allow our users to securely enter in their payment information, and it's going to go straight from this iframe that gets embedded in our code and sent out to the Stripe servers where it gets authenticated against their bank, etc., and the money goes into your account. All that happens between the user and Stripe. It doesn't have anything to do with you or your application, fortunately, but then we get some information back from Stripe that allows us to store whatever we need to store. So we're not going to be storing credit card numbers or any type of sensitive data like that, which you would never want to. You don't want to be liable for any of that. So you let Stripe handle that, and then you, once the payment has gone through and the money is in your account, you basically get a message that says, hey, it worked or it did not work, and then you handle that appropriately. So here it says collecting payments on your website consists of creating an object to track a payment, collecting card information, and submitting the payment to Stripe for processing. Stripe uses this payment object, called a payment intent, to track and handle all the states of the payment until it's completed, even when the bank requires customer intervention like two-factor authentication. So the first thing we're going to do on server side is use their official library. And so I think Ruby might have been selected by default, so I just went over here and clicked on Node, and then we'll just copy this npm install -- save Stripe and head over to our project. So I'm inside of VS Code, or actually VS Codium. You can do it from GURM, or you can do it locally with Sublime or VS Code, whatever you're using, it doesn't matter. As long as you have access to Node and a MongoDB, a terminal, and a code editor, then you can follow along. So I have Colt's version 11 deployed right here, and the first thing I'm going to do to it is just paste in that npm install -- save Stripe and press enter. So we're going to get Stripe installed and into our package.json and our node modules folder. Okay, so that's installed. Let's jump back over to the tutorial. The next thing they want us to do is create a payment intent. Remember, this is the object that represents your intent to collect payment from a customer, tracking charge attempts and payment state changes throughout the process. Create a payment intent on your server with an amount and currency. Always decide how much to charge on the server side, a trusted environment as opposed to the client. So basically, if you're not already aware, if you're doing stuff on the front end in the client, those two words are synonymous, by the way. If you're doing things with client-side JavaScript and you're collecting sensitive data there, that is bad because that can be hacked very easily. Whereas on the server, you have quite a bit more security. So here they're just saying if you're going to be putting a amount that you're charging the customer, which in our case, we're going to charge them $20, you want to do that on the server side so it can't be hacked. That way somebody can't go in there and with a little bit of coding know-how, change it from $20 to $0 and then get your product for free. So this prevents malicious customers from being able to choose their own prices. Cool. All right, again, I have Node selected here. And this is server.js, which is synonymous with app.js. Or actually, we may end up using, this might actually go inside of our route. So we're going to copy this information here. And by the way, this right here, oh great. This is my test secret API key now that everybody can see it. When you go through the tutorial when you're logged in, it shows everybody your stuff. So this is a test key. You can't do anything with it. I will be rolling it and changing it after the tutorial's over. So use your own key, please. All right, so let's head over here to routes. Index.js, and this is where we do like login and sign up. So this is essentially where I plan on charging the user. So I'm just going to paste this in here. It says set your secret keys. Remember to switch to your live account in production. We say const. If you don't know let and const yet, don't worry. It's basically the same as var. You could even put the word var here if you want to, but for the sake of maintaining the integrity of the tutorial, we will use const. All right, so require Stripe, that's what we just installed. And then it passes in this key right here. And so that's the test key. You can see I have a file here called example.env. So you'll want to create this for yourself, except you'll call it .env. And with .env installed, you can pull sensitive data from here and put it into your application without showing it to everybody who's watching this video. Unfortunately, I already have it exposed here, so it's not that big of a deal. But anyway, this is secret key test. we're going to change it to process.env.stripe secret key. Okay, and so this is going to pull from my .env file. Now, in order for it to do that, I have to install the .env package, which I have not done yet. So do npm I, and I only use this in development. Some people use it in production depending on what kind of server they have. But in my case, I'm going to do a -D, which stands for dev dependencies, and then install .env, D-O-T-E-N-V, all one word. Okay. So with that installed, the next thing is over in app.js at the very top before we have var express. We want to, I think the code is require .env, and then it's just .config. I could be wrong. If it doesn't work, we'll look it up in the documentation. But what this does is it looks for a .env file in the same directory, this main directory here, and it's going to then add all of these keys onto the process.env object and set them equal to this value, that value, etc. So that means that over here in our index.js routes, we can then access the stripe secret key via process.env.stripe_secret_key. So this will end up producing a string from whatever's inside of our .env file. So again, this stuff right here is going to come from your development dashboard. So once you sign up for Stripe, go ahead and just click this link here, API keys. It'll take you directly to them, and make sure you switch it to testing mode. Okay, great. All right, so payment intent is creating a payment intent for a value. Basically, the value, if I'm not mistaken, is the number multiplied by 100. So if we wanted $20, then we would need to do 2,000. So it's 20 times 100, you add 2 zeros. The currency _USD, United States dollar. Verify your integration in this guide by including this parameter. So metadata integration check, accept a payment. Okay, so we have that there. We're probably going to end up moving this into a route here in a little bit, I'm pretty sure. But for now, we'll just leave it like that. All right. So moving on. Included in the return payment intent is a client secret, which is used on the client side to securely complete the payment process instead of passing the entire payment intent object. There are different approaches that you can use to pass the client secret to the client side. So this is a single page application version right here, or server-side rendering, which we are doing. Now in their example, they're using HBS, which stands for handlebars. We're going to be using EJS because that's what most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with from Colt Steele's The Web Developer Bootcamp. Don't worry, the syntax is very similar, and I will change it as we're going along. So they have a view here called checkout.handlebars, and this is the code inside of it. So let's go ahead and head back over to our code, go over to views. Now, of course, this doesn't exist yet. So we have landing, login, and register all inside the views directory. We're going to create a new file and call it checkout.ejs. Again, ours is not going to be using HBS, which is handlebars. Ours will be using EJS, which is embedded JavaScript. And we want it to follow the same format as like login and register, which uses this partial and header, right? And so right here, we're just going to include, and then I think it's partials/header. And in fact, there's new syntax for EJS, so let's just go ahead and start using that right away because we're going to have to do it here in a little bit anyway. So the new syntax is that you put a minus sign after the %, and then you do include with parentheses like a function, and then whatever's inside there is going to include a string quotations around it. And so then we will paste in this little form here and then include the footer. Alrighty, so then for let's just take a quick break, not break, but break from the tutorial so I can show you something. So we're going to do an npm audit. If you've never seen this command, it basically goes through and checks to see what kind of issues you have with versions in your npm packages. Now this is telling us right off the bat, error, blah, blah, blah. Errors were found in your package lock.json. Run npm install to fix them. So the first thing we'll do is npm I, which is short for npm install. All right, now it's telling us, after it installed EJS, etc., that one package is looking for funding. Okay, we're going to skip that. One high severity vulnerability. Run npm audit fix to fix them. So if you don't want to fix them outright, you can look at them manually with npm audit, and you can see that the issue we're having here is MongoDB inside of Mongoose. And so we'll do npm audit fix real quick. And now we have 0 of, oh, it said it fixed 0, so it's unable to fix it. All right, so it says it'll create breaking changes if we force it. Let's go ahead and look at package.json and just observe a couple things. First of all, Express is 4.13. Express is already in version 5 something, but for the sake of this tutorial, I think we should probably use one of the newer versions, which is like 4.17 or something like that. So let's just jump over to expressjs.com and see which Express 4 versions they have. So you can see that 5 is still in alpha, so we're not going to mess with that. But if we go to the API reference for 4, it should tell us, maybe it's back at the home page. There it is, right there. So next to Express, you can see in small blue letters 4.17.1. So we go back over here and we just change this to 4.17.1, save it, and do an npm I, which is npm install for short. All right, and so I think that did what we needed to do. Now Mongoose, you can see, is 4.1.12. So this is 3 years ago, mind you, so Mongoose has been updated quite a bit since then. So let's go ahead and take a look at Mongoose. I don't think it's mongoose.com. I think it's like mongoose.js or something. So let's pull that up. There he is, mongoose.js. All right, so this is in version 5.9.9. So we'll do an npm I mongoose at 5.9.9, and that should update this 4.1.12 here to 5.9.9. So let's give that a second. Someone just asked if I'll upload this tutorial on my channel. Yes. Unless something like catastrophic happens while we're doing the live recording, it'll be automatically uploaded within like half an hour to an hour of completion. Okay, so 5.9.9 is good. And EJS has been updated too. It's well beyond that. So what we can do is npm I EJS at, and I don't know the version, so we'll just do latest. And so it's at 2.3.4 for this current version, and now it's at 3.0.2. Now mind you, version 3 came with some breaking changes, and that may be what they're talking about earlier when I was trying to do npm audit fix. Those may have been the breaking changes. And so it ran real quick. It said fix 0 of 0 vulnerabilities. So what we did manually there actually did it for us. And the breaking change is that the syntax for how we include stuff has changed. And you saw how I did it a second ago. So over here in checkout, you can see this syntax differs from, let me just pull a different one up, like this one right here. So it's not super different, but it will break. And so we could go through each file manually, right? And just change all of these to the newer syntax. But we're not going to do that. What we could do instead is just do edit, replace in files. And so what we need, well, here's this right here, ..partials footer is for anything that's inside of a subfolder. So we do have some of those. And then this right here is, let me just go ahead and show you how I got that so that you're not like, where'd that come from? If we go to the files and we go to views, whoop, I'm opening all kinds of stuff, hold on. Views, you can see this is the old syntax, right? So there's probably some more of this happening in some of the other files. So we do edit, replace in files, and now we paste in how we want to replace it, we update it. So we put the parentheses and the string, and we put the minus sign. So this is the new syntax, and then this button right here, I just push it, It says, hey, we got 2 occurrences across 2 different files. Do you want to replace it? Here's the new syntax. I say, yep, that's what I want. And you can see it changed here. Now let's go ahead and change it for the footer. So it's basically the same thing, just the word footer instead of the word header. And so it finds it in 2 files here. And then we push this button here. Same thing. Hey, do you want to change 2 files? Yes. Okay, so that's not the only situation where we need to change it, because that's just directly inside views. If you go inside of something like campgrounds, comments, or not partials, but campgrounds or comments, you'll see that these ones at the top have 2 dots because they have to go up out of the directory they're in, then back down into views, right? So in order to do that, let's just go ahead and copy this version, edit, replace in files, and this time this is header, so we'll change this to /header, and this has 2 dots instead of 1, so we'll put 2 dots in there. We'll go ahead and let's see here. It should. It's not letting me do something. There we go. Now that it's found all 6 different situations, we can go ahead and press that button and replace. It changed it here, but it also changed it in 5 other files. And then we'll do the same thing for footer, which we can just change the text here. So we say footer, it finds it in 6 files, and then what we want to replace it to again is footer, but it has 2 dots instead of 1. And so we push this, replace that, and that should do it in terms of updating all the EJS includes to use the newer syntax, which again is the minus sign after the opening % there, and then the parentheses, and then the string around the argument. All right, cool. So that's that for getting things up to date with EJS and Mongoose. We are going to have some issues with Mongoose because there's some newer syntax, but I will update that as it comes. All right, so if we go back to the tutorial, next thing they want us to do is they have Express, we already have that. Express handlebars, we're using EJS. App, we already have that. App engine is handlebars, we're already using EJS again. That's already taken care of, that's already taken care of. So then they have this route called checkout, and it's on the main index /checkout. So it'd be like localhost 3000 /checkout or website.com /checkout. And so we're going to borrow this, but we're going to change it to router because we're going to put it into our route file. So let's go back over here, close this, go back to our files, and go to routes index.js. Now we have our main route, which is our landing page, and then we have our register route, register post route, login post, and then log out. So down here, we'll just say checkout. And we're missing something here at the very beginning. We need the word router. I took out the word app because that's not how we're doing it. We're using router inside of the actual router here. And this is saying fetch or create the payment intent, render checkout, client secret, intent.client secret. Okay, so this is only a portion of what needs to happen here. We are going to finish this with the rest of the tutorial, of course. But this is where this goes. So this router.get /checkout. You'll notice it's an async function, so you may not be familiar with async await, but that's what we're about to get into here in a second. Don't worry, I'll explain it as we're going along. It's not difficult, it's not complicated, it actually makes things a lot easier. So if you've been dealing with things like callbacks or even with promises for however long, now that you're going to see this syntax, it might open some new windows for you. All right, so going down to step 3, collect card details. It says, you're ready to collect card information on the client with Stripe Elements. Elements is a set of pre-built UI components for collecting and validating card number, zip code, expiration date. A Stripe element contains an iframe that securely sends the payment information to Stripe over an HTTPS connection. The checkout page address must also start with HTTPS rather than HTTP for your integration to work. You can test your integration without using HTTPS. So we are in testing. Remember, if you got your key, you want to get the test key from your dashboard API keys section. And so that's what I have it set up with currently. And then once you're done, you can enable it to normal so that you're ready to accept live payments, actual money from customers. So we're not using React. We're going to use the HTML plus JavaScript here. Set up Stripe elements. So Stripe Elements is automatically available as a feature of Stripe.js. Include the Stripe.js script in your checkout page by adding it to the head of your HTML file. Always load Stripe.js directly from jsstripe.com to remain PCI compliant. Do not include the script in a bundle or host a copy of it yourself. So basically what they're saying is you have to use this CDN. All right, so we're going to go ahead and copy that and go back to checkout.ejs. And they want us to include it in the header here. Well, this header is a partial header, so what we can do is just throw it into views, partials, header EJS, right after, I don't know what happened there, right after our style sheet here. We'll just plug in the CDN. Great. So now it's included over here in our checkout.ejs file. Okay. So create an instance of elements with the following JavaScript in your checkout page. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. For now, I'm just going to put it into a script here. We'll move this into its own file a little bit later in the tutorial, but just so you can kind of see things all together. Now, this is your primary, what do they call it? Publishable key. This is your test key. Now, yours is going to be different, and what we want to do is typically, so it's not a huge deal to put your publishable key because it's a public thing into your front end script. It's already going to end up there. You could, if you wanted to, pull it from your server. So you could store it in your .env file, and then you could either render it into the view, or you can just put it in this way. No matter what, it's always going to end up being shown in the view. The difference between including it hard-coded like this or using a sorry, I got distracted by something in the live chat. So, or using a environment variable, which I can show you in a second, is that if you push this up to GitHub, then it's also blatantly available on GitHub. Again, it is a public key, so it's not a big deal. It's only a big deal if someone's also able to get your secret key. So for the time being, I'm just going to leave it like this. We'll get it working, and then I can show you the other method of moving it. Hopefully I don't forget. So somebody is raising their hand or telling me to stop, something like that. But you're going to have to actually use text and tell me. Unless he's just waving. I'm not sure what those emojis are. Okay, that's in the live chat, by the way. Go ahead and save this and head back over here. All right, add elements to your payment page. Element needs a place to live in your payment form. Create empty DOM nodes, containers with unique IDs in the payment form, and then pass those IDs to elements. So this is interesting. They have the checkout handlebars, but then down here, they're using just HTML. So you kind of have to like figure out what the heck is going on. So we already have this here, and now they're telling us to put this form in here with these IDs, and these IDs will make it to where elements can select. And so, yeah, not entirely sure what they're wanting just yet with that. And again, the tutorial that I provided previously is taken from, it's not a tutorial, source code I provided yesterday is from their source code that I cherry picked. So again, we're going to have to just figure out what the heck they're wanting us to do. All right, so here is this form that's asking us to pay, and then here's this other one that's asking us to submit a payment. They're both in the same tutorial, so we got to figure out what exactly they want. All right, now when the form above has loaded, create an instance of an element and mount it to the element container. So we're going to put this here. Card is equal to elements.createCard. And then what? Has a style. Okay, sorry. So this was confusing because I was like, why are they putting CSS in the JavaScript? But Stripe Elements has a style object, and so they use a style object variable where they have their base color. So they're pulling information from JavaScript, which is not uncommon if you see if you use React to put CSS inside of JavaScript. Will Stripe accept payment in Indian currency is one of the questions. I'm pretty sure that it will. There's a tutorial that's just for USA and Canada, but I think this particular tutorial should accept all of them. You'll just have to test it. And then that's a high five from Nigeria. Love the work you're doing. Stay safe. Thank you. And high five to you also. Okay, moving on. Next thing we want, so the card element simplifies the form and minimizes the number of required fields by inserting a single flexible input field that securely collects all necessary card and billing details. Otherwise, combine card number, card expiry, and card CVC elements for a flexible multi-input card form. So there's a little example here of additional payment forms. We're just going to use the simple one. You can see an example of it here at the top where it's just one input. If you want to get crazy and add multiple inputs, which I've done that for clients, then just see the additional payment forms. Okay, so always collect a postal code to increase card acceptance rates and reduce fraud. The single input card element automatically collects and sends the customer's postal code to Stripe. If you build your payment form with multi-input card elements, add a separate input for your, okay, so that's not going to apply to us. For a full list of supported element types, you can refer to documentation. All right, so the element validates user input as it is typed to help your customer catch mistakes, listen to change events on the card element, and display any errors. Cool. So we'll just go ahead and add this to the bottom of our script here. Make sure that the formatting is correct. Save. Again, oh, so this is ES Next, and then here's regular JavaScript. So we'll use ES Next. If you're planning on like supporting older browsers, then you can just use regular JavaScript. It's really not that much different, in fact. So we'll go ahead and just use regular JavaScript so we don't create any issues here. There we go. But I would probably recommend using ES Next just because you want to stay up to date. And if you need to, you can always use Babel or something like that to compile it out to regular JavaScript. So in this case, again, we're going to use the regular ES5 syntax just so that we don't have to worry about cross-browser issues. All right. Submit the payment. Oh, wait. So someone had asked about accepting payments from India. Postal code validation depends on your customer's billing country. Use our international test cards to experiment with other postal code formats. So give that a try if you're trying to do something other than, I think, US or Canada. All right, submit the payment to Stripe. Rather than sending the entire payment intent object to the client, use its client secret from step 2. That is different from your API keys that authenticate Stripe API requests. So I'll show you this in a second. Client secret should still be handled carefully because it can complete the charge. Do not log it, embed it in the URLs, or expose it to anyone but the customer. Again, we're using HTML plus JavaScript. We're not using React. To complete the payment, when the user clicks, retrieve the client secret from the payment intent you create in step 2 and call stripe.confirm card payment with the client secret. Pass additional billing details such as the cardholder's name and address to the billing details hash. The card element automatically sends the customer's postal code information. However, combining card number, CVC, and card expiry elements requires you to pass the postal code to billing details address postal code. So this should work for what we're currently doing. So at this point, let's just plug this in here and I'll walk through what's going on. Okay. So we're getting the form with the ID of payment form. So if we scroll up to the top here, here's a form element with an ID of payment form. We select it with this line, and then we add an event listener, which is a submit listener, and then we handle the event. So we prevent the default event, which is just to submit the form. So then we use Stripe, which we've included right here, to confirm the card payment. We pass in the client secret, and the client secret comes from step 2. Now, mind you, the client secret was right here on that previous form that we had, so we're going to have to figure out how to do that. Because at this current time, there is no client secret variable in here. So I can show you how we're going to pull that in here in a minute. So then the second argument to confirm card payment is an object with payment method, which is the card, which it takes the card. We have a card variable right here, which is a stripe element to create card with a style, card.mount card element. So if we look for an element up here with card element, you can see it's this div. So this is going to get replaced with the elements form. So once we start testing it, you'll see what all that is. So it's going to pull that information for the card, and where are we? Here we go. And put it right here inside payment method. And then billing details, right here they just have an example, Jenny Rosen. You could also pull that information from the logged in user, would be most ideal, or if you want the user to submit actually not the logged in user, I'm wrong, because they could be potentially using somebody else's credit card. So you would want to get it directly from the form. All right, so with this example name in here, blah, 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 basically we're going to confirm the card payment, and then when that async function is done running, we get the result. Now, if there's an error with the result, then we got to go ahead and log that error, and potentially we'd want to display it in some type of UI. I'll show you how we can do that with flash messages, which is what Colt is using in the course. Okay, otherwise, if there's no error, then we know it was successful. So you can see here the payment has been processed. Yay. So if result.paymentintent.status is equal to succeeded, then we show a success message to the customer. And then there's a risk of the customer closing the window before the callback execution. So set up a webhook or plugin to listen for the payment intent.succeeded event that handles any business critical post-payment actions. So we're going to do the business critical stuff inside the route. So I don't think we're going to run into this particular issue of the user like potentially closing the window or whatever. Either their user account gets switched from is paid false to is paid true, or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then they have to pay again. So we'll work that out in the routes. Okay. Stripe.confirm card payment may take several seconds to complete. During this time, disable your form from being resubmitted rather, and show a waiting indicator like a spinner. If you receive an error, show it to the customer, re-enable the form, and hide the waiting indicator. So I have some source code for that. I will plug it in here in a little bit and show you all that. And then test your integration. So at this point, they're basically saying like, oh, you're done. Well, we're not done because we have to handle some more of the client-side JavaScript, and we also have to handle the server-side stuff. So let's go back. At this point, we're kind of on our own to be able to like really make it work with our application. So this is where many novice-level developers would possibly run into some issues, because you're like, okay, how do I go from the tutorial, which doesn't really, it's agnostic of YelpCamp, so it doesn't know what we need to do exactly to integrate it, to getting this working, right? So that's where we're going to step in here and get things working. Now, this is saying that we have a client secret that's being passed in. This is handlebar syntax, and let's just run back up to step 2 real quick. Create payment intent. Okay. So included in the return payment intent is a client secret, which is used in the client side to securely complete the payment process. Instead of passing the entire payment intent object, there are different approaches that you can use to pass the client secret to the client side. And so then here, create the intent, which we already know how to do that, and then pass it to checkout as client secret. And so let's go to index, scroll up here. This is payment intent. Go down here to this route. You can see they have const intent is equal to blah blah. So we're just going to go ahead and get rid of that. Now we have our payment intent. They were calling it intent, so we're going to change that to payment intent.client secret. So when you create this stripe.paymentintents.create, and you tell it how much money you want to charge for the payment, how much money you intend to take from the customer, that is, and then what type of currency, then what you get back is this object, payment intent. Then we send the client secret to the front end. Now this is only going to be available to that specific user. We're not going to log it in the console on the front end. We're not going to put it in the URL, in the form, anything like that. Okay, so with that being passed to the front end, we're rendering checkout here. So now this variable client secret is available to us in the front end. And you'll notice this is client secret, this is client secret on payment intent. So what we can actually do to make this look a little bit nicer and use some more modern syntax is we can say const object destructuring client secret. I think I said client intent, but for payment intent. Okay, client secret is equal to payment intent. And then what we do here is it would look like this, client underscore secret colon client underscore secret, but since they're the same on either side of the colon, we can just get rid of the latter on the right side, and what you end up with is client secret. And now this is the exact same thing as what we just had on there, but this is object destructuring, and it allows us to make a more succinct version of that key value pair. And so again, we're pulling the property client underscore secret from the payment intent object that we just created right here, and then we're passing it into the checkout.ejs view via an environment variable on res.locals. And so that environment variable will be called client underscore secret. Now, we have async for this function right here. This is an arrow function. If you don't know arrow functions, it's simply a function just like that. So what you do is you just get rid of the function keyword and plug in this little equal sign greater than arrow. And now you have this more succinct way of writing a function. There's some other gotchas that go in there too, so make sure that you watch some videos from someone like Fun Function, or I think maybe Colt Steele has some on his YouTube, where he talks about the ins and outs of using arrow functions. But for this example, it's kind of trivial. We don't have to worry about that stuff. So async, that's important. This keyword right here that makes this function async makes it so that we can use the await keyword. And so normally you do a stripe.paymentintents.create.then, or if you want to use the really old syntax, you do .create and then you do a comma after that object and do a function error first callback. We're not doing that because then you get into callback hell and it's just not a modern approach. So what you do instead is you say await whatever this async function is, and basically what it does is it doesn't move to the next line of code, which would normally happen with an async function. Instead, it waits until the async function is done, until the promise has resolved or rejected, and if it resolves, it sets the result equal to the variable payment intent, at which point we can go down to the next line. Now, how do you handle errors in this situation? Glad you asked. We use a really simple syntax called try catch. And so catch takes an argument of error. Everything that you're trying goes like that inside the try block. And what it's really trying is this await function here. And if for whatever reason this .create function rejects the promise that it returns, rejects, and you get an error, then instead of assigning it to payment intent, it gets caught by this .catch right here. So then down inside this catch block, we have access to that error that it just caught with the ERR keyword. And so now what we can do is do a rec.flash error, comma, ERR.message. I don't know where that extra quote came from. All right, so rec.flash, first argument is error, second argument is ERR, that's that error object. And then there's a message property that is a string that tells us what went wrong. And so you could log that to the console and you can make a more pretty error message, but in this case, this is how we're going to do it. And then we're just going to res.redirect back to whatever the previous page that we were on was. And if for whatever reason back isn't working the way that you want it to, then you could simply just do something like /. So what this will do is it'll redirect back to the previous page, and it'll give us a nice little error message telling us what the heck went wrong in the event that something does go wrong. So in the event that things go right, which is the ideal situation, we're going to render this checkout.ejs view with the client underscore secret variable. Okay, so that puts us over here where we can then access client underscore secret. Now what they're doing is they're putting it on this button right here, but then they give us this other form and they say, oh, you can do it this way too. So it's like, okay, I guess we don't need to use the first one. If I'm not mistaken, we can just use the second one. So this client secret, if you remember, is an environment variable. Now normally to get access to an environment variable, we want to use something like this from EJS. Okay, but how do we get access to it inside of our script? It's basically the same thing here. We're going to say var client underscore secret is equal to. Now, depending on what this is, it may not output how we expect it to. We may have to wrap it in quotes to make sure that it ends up being a string. And so we'll find out here in a second. We'll go ahead and throw a debugger after it, and then we can open up our code and see if that works. And so we get this client secret, and now somewhere down here, we need to pass it in as client secret. Now, I'm using client underscore secret, which, mind you, in JavaScript, we don't use, what is this called? Snake syntax or whatever. We use camel case. And so client capital S secret is equal to, and then this is the environment variable that's coming in. And if we go down, then we're able to pass in the client secret here for confirm payment. Sweet. All right. They have up here a div called card errors, roll alert, that it allows us to select it and put the errors in there. We'll worry about that in a second. And then of course card element is going to be where we're going to get the input for checking out. And then of course the pay. Now you can hard code how much you want them to pay. So you could say pay $20 like right here if you want to, or you could put that formatting if you wanted. Or if you wanted to true, like someone could change that HTML and it wouldn't matter, because no matter what, back over in the route, the amount is going to be $20. So you could change this, you could hack it or whatever, it's not going to change a thing. So you can either hard code this, or since we have the amount here, 2,000, we could also pass it in here and just say amount. And you can put it in any way you want. Let's say we put it in as a number, or a string. It's up to you. You could even put it with the $sign if you're going to use a string. And so if we do it that way, now we have this environment variable called amount. And over here in the checkout, instead of saying pay $20, we would just say pay amount. It's really up to you. It's not going to really affect things either way. If you just want to hard code it, that's fine too. But at least here, you could always, if you decide to change this to $50, you could very quickly change this to $50 as well. You could even make it to where this number divided by 100 ends up being this number, so that you only change it one time, and then the rest of your code, it changes. You don't have to worry about going to the view and changing it there. So just to show you an example of that, just because I'm OCD, we could say something like let amount equal to 2,000, or actually let's just say 20. And then here we'll say amount times 100. And then over here we'll just say amount. So the amount here ends up being the number 20. The amount here ends up being 20 times 100, which is 2,000. And we save that. So then here we put the $sign and we end up with $20. And so again, now if you wanted to, you could just say, oh, I want this to be 45 or $40, $45. And that would change it here and here and here, all just by changing it in one place. Okay, great. Now let's go ahead and see if we can get this app up and running and just see if any of it works visually. Before we do that, I want to hop on over to app.js and just change a couple things. Right here we have a Mongoose Connect that Colt had, where he put this production database in here, which I'm going to get rid of that and just use a local database. And so one thing to change is that localhost now needs to point to the port number that's being used by MongoDB, which is 27017. So it's localhost, and then you'll just add colon 27017 before the /. This is not version 10, obviously, so we'll just say version 11, Stripe, something like that. Whatever's clever. That way we just get a brand new database inside of our MongoDB. Okay, great. So I feel like there's going to be some other errors. We'll just address them as they come. So I'm going to go ahead and get a local Mongo daemon server running so that we can access the database. and that didn't work. So let me make sure that they're all shut off elsewhere. Okay, it looks like I had one running somewhere else. All right, now it's running, and as you can see, it's running on port 27017, so that's why we put that right there. And so then we can run, normally you just run node app.js or node daemon, however you want to do it. In my case, lately I've been going to package.json, going up here to the scripts object, putting a comma after the start script, and doing what I call a DevScript. And so I just make sure that the port is the port that I want, so it's port equals 3000. And then I just run node daemon. If you want to be explicit, you can make sure that it goes to app.js instead of like index.js or something like that. Okay, so if you save that, then you can just run npm run dev down here. And this will change it to port 3000, and it'll run node daemon, so it continually restarts. There is an error, we'll deal with that in a second. But before we do, over in app.js, down at the very bottom where you have app.listen, you probably have process.env.port and then .ip. And that's important because we just set the port to 3000. But now we don't have to change it, hard code it, or anything like that. And we can still push this to production, and it can still use whatever port our production server for somewhere like Heroku is using automatically. So that's why we have it that way inside of package.json with the port for 3000, specifically for our development environment. Whereas something like Heroku is going to use the start script. Okay, so we have some errors here. Current URL string parser is deprecated, will be removed. Use new URL parser true. And then the other one is use unified topology true. All right, so if you haven't seen this error already, up here where we have mongoose.connect inside of app.js, we're going to put a second argument, so comma, open up an object here. And inside the object, we're going to use new URL parser and set it to true. And then we're also going to use unified topology and set it to true. So again, mongoose.connect, first argument is a connection string. Second argument after a comma is an object literal that has two properties, use new URL parser with camel case and use unified topology with camel case, both set to the Boolean value of true. So go ahead and save that. You'll notice the server restarts automatically. And YelpCamp server has started. We're not seeing any issues. So let's head on over to localhost 3000. And we have to manually go to checkout to make sure that it works. And here's this little pay $20 and it says card number. Now, the CSS, oh yeah, so here's the month, blah, blah. So it created this input here, but it didn't style it at all. And to get it styled, does this tutorial include that? Let's go ahead and jump back over here. I don't think this particular tutorial includes any type of styling. So what I would do if I were you is go to the very top where it says overview, and then you see where it says clone from GitHub. Go ahead and click on that. And don't clone it, I mean you can, but instead copy the HTTPS URL, paste it in, go to this GitHub repo, and the one that we're using is this one right here, decline on card authentication. We're not using webhooks with or without. So click on this decline on card authentication. And then they have client, web, CSS. Normalize is something that is already being used by Bootstrap, which is included in our project already. And then there's global. So global is where they're styling the their form that they're using with elements. However, this particular form that we took from the tutorial doesn't have the proper elements with classes and IDs to be styled by that CSS. So I'm trying to think what the easiest way to do this would be. So I had I had already made available the solution to this, and I had used, it's basically this solution right here. There's the client solution, and then the server I had pulled from Node. But I think we can do it a little bit differently. So we're using, in this particular project, YelpCamp version 11, Colt's using 3.37 of Bootstrap. So if we go to CSS, and then we go down to forms. We could potentially make our form look like this. Let's give it a try and see. So I'm not sure if this is going to work or not because I'm pretty sure it's using an iframe, but we're going to find out. Okay, that might have done something. It looks like it changed the font. So then the other thing here, let's take a look at the views header real quick. And by the way, we're getting into a little bit of styling right now, and if you've done CSS before, you know it's probably, at least for me, it's the most annoying part of the project. So bear with me while we kind of hack this together. But in the header, we have a container that has potential error or success messages, and then it closes, which is fine. It's not how I would do it, but it's helpful because now we know that we need to open up another container here. And then we'll put this form inside that container. And then we'll just drop that down. So then that moves things into the center. It kind of puts a margin on either side. Okay, cool. So then back over here in Bootstrap, we basically want this form. So then the inputs need a class of form control. Unfortunately, we don't have access to the inputs here. I'm almost positive that this is like an iframe or something. So if we select it, this little element, let's see what we have. We have a div. Yeah, I feel like we don't have a whole lot of control over this. Elements app, so this stuff got added automatically. Let's see. We have access to the button, of course. So we can do something like class is equal to button primary. Okay. So then there's the card number, month, year, CVC. They're kind of far apart. Makes me want to, of course, put this inside of a column that's a little bit smaller. So we'll do a row with call medium, and this is Bootstrap 3, so we have to do an offset if we want it to be centered. So it'd be like call medium offset dash, let's think about this, 4, I think. So 4 and 4 is 8, and another 4 is 12. So call medium 4. Let's just try that. So then again, we move the form up inside of that column. And yeah, that's a little bit better. So the card number goes here, 1, 2, 3, 4, blah, 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 blah. Oh, great. So the error message already works. That's nice. And as they said in the tutorial before, as you're typing, it's already kind of happening live. And so then month, day, or month, year, CVC. Okay, great. So refresh. All right, so it's not the most beautiful thing. If you want to style it exactly like I have in my other tutorial, just see the source code, and I'll link to it in the description. It's in a community post right now on my YouTube wall. But this is good enough. This will allow us to test the card number, right? Okay, so then we'll be able to pay the $20. And let's go ahead and see if we can get this to, might have to put it on the column, but see if we can get it to text center. So we'll borrow this, put let's put it on that and see what happens. There we go. Yeah, so actually, sorry, I want it to be on the right, and I think it's just the line right. Maybe it's float right. Let's try one other thing real quick. We'll put this inside of a div. There's a couple ways to do this, but just to get it working as quickly as possible. Let's try float right. That doesn't work. Let's try a text align right. I don't know these. There we go, text right. That's the one. text-right. So we put the button inside of a div, gave it a class of text-right, and it moved the button over to the right side. That's just personal preference. If you want to put it wherever you want, that's fine. I'm going to stop messing with the CSS because we're eating up valuable time. But now it accepts our card number and month, year, CVC, so that's important. Okay, and then if you wanted to, above the form, you could say something in an H1 like registration payment. That's pretty intense as an H1, but so I'll change it to, semantically it should be an H1, but in terms of style, just to get it how I want it, I'll put it as an H3 for now. All right, now let's get back to the tutorial. So potentially we have access to the client secret, and we can figure that out by just simply opening up our Chrome developer tools. So open up Chrome developer tools. I think it's like Control-Shift-J or something like that on PC. For me, it's Command. What did I even just press? No, that's not it. Go back. I'm blanking. I think it's Command-Option-J. Yes, on Mac. Okay, so what we want to do is refresh the page at this point. We should get a debugger. We do. And there is my apparently client secret. And then there's a PK test. Okay. So that seems like it's working. And it's doing what we want it to do. Mind you, the client secret is what gets generated by this payment intent. So we make the payment intent, and then we pull the client secret from the payment intent, we pass it into the view. When the view gets rendered, we then pull it into our client-side JavaScript. So we're going from server side, rendering into the view, and then putting that in the client-side JavaScript where it can then be assigned to a variable and used, right, where is it? Here, with this confirm payment. Okay, so assuming that all of that works, we either get an error or we get a success. And so if we get a success, then the next thing I want to do is, well, we'd want to redirect back to the area that I'm going to restrict. So I'm going to restrict campgrounds. Like right now, if you wanted to, you go YelpCamp, view all campgrounds, boom, you're in. And I'm not even logged in. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it to where you have to be logged in, you have to be registered with a confirmed payment to be able to access campgrounds. The only other place you're going to be able to go if you're not any of those things is the landing page, the login, and the sign up. So once this is successful, then we'll say window.location.href is equal to /campgrounds paid is equal to true. And so this is going to be, you're only going to see this message once, but basically this is how we're going to redirect you after a successful payment. So we're redirecting from the client side as opposed to from the server side, and it'll take you to campgrounds, which will now be unlocked once we do some more middleware and whatnot. And we'll use this, anything after the question mark is what's called a query string. So we'll pull this query string inside the route /campgrounds, and we'll see if it exists. If it does exist and it's true, then we'll be able to determine what kind of flash message to send the user. Great. So what the other thing you could do if you wanted is, instead of redirecting, you could just put the message here, and then the user has to manually go to the next page. We could potentially explore that as well, but for now, let's go ahead and just get the logic working. Okay, so this is checkout, which is a get route, and it essentially just loads the checkout page. But what we need to also handle is the post route so that we can update the user itself. And so confirm card payment. So this is interesting. This tutorial actually seems like it's different than the one that I did. Let me just take a look at what Let's go back and look at their client. So this is the one that I pulled from. They use an HTML file or whatever. And so on the HTML file, they have Stripe, which is what we have. Then they have their script, which is what we have. They have all their styling. We don't have that. We just used Bootstrap. Then they have this form. They've got some extra classes and whatnot so they can style it. And they have a little spinner animation, which I didn't do. And then they basically just tell you like, oh, it's successful. So that's all on the client, which is fine. Oh, I need to go back to the client, and now we're going to look at this script.js. And so here they have their order data. They get their Stripe key from the back end, and then they set up elements using the Stripe key, which is this function here, which we have that hard-coded right here. So they set up elements, they get their elements, they get their style. So we're not using any of those styles. We just have the base color. We could, I guess, change the font size if we wanted to. And then they create the card with the style, and they mount the card element, and then they return Stripe, card, and client secret. Data.client secret. So where's data coming from? Data comes from Stripe elements being invoked. Data has the publishable key and the client secret. So we're doing ours a little bit differently, but Stripe key. So then they have a pay function, which is probably, it's right here. They listen to the form. When the form gets submitted, they prevent the default, and then they pay with Stripe using the card and the client secret, which that's what we're doing here. So that happens here. So down inside pay, they've got some change loading state, which is just their spinner animation thing. They say Stripe, create payment for the card, and they pass the card in. Create payment method. So we already have our card. I don't think we need to do that. And then once they have the payment method, they get this ID from it, and they fetch /pay with a post request, application JSON, collect card details and pay for the order, post payment helpers. This is interesting. And then this stuff down here is just handling of the spinner. So we could do it this way, and this is the way I've done it when I initially did it. I just copied this and put it with YelpCamp. So it's possible, and I can share the source code for that, but it is a bit different from what they're doing in this other tutorial, which is interesting to me. So the way we're doing it currently makes me feel like we could, the thing about it is like we can invoke a request to the back end that then changes the user from is paid false to is paid true. But if it's just on a route with a query string, then that's problematic because anybody could do that. You wouldn't necessarily have to pay for it if they just looked at the client-side code. So it's not secure. So it's kind of annoying that their tutorial is different than their source code for the tutorial. So give me just a second to ponder on this. I'll think out loud, or I'll try to, but I'm trying to figure out what the easiest way to securely update the user would be. So basically, if we go over here and we look at the server side, for Node, they have it in a bunch of different languages. If we look at server.js, they're bringing in Stripe. They're using Express.json. They're creating the intent. Order amount, currency, payment method ID, error requires action, true, confirm, true. Payment method ID. So when they create the intent on the back end, that's when they are actually charging the client. And the important thing here is the payment method ID, apparently. So we're going to jump back over to the client and take a look at that real quick. So we go to client, script.js, and here you see they have order data objects, just some array with an object with an ID. Currency is USD, which is fine. But when they pay, where's that pay function? Did I miss it? Here. Here it is. Order data payment method ID is equal to result.paymentMethod.id. Result is a dot then from create payment method using the card. Interesting. So the difference between what we're doing and what they're doing is that we're doing confirm card payment, whereas they, in this other version of the tutorial, are creating the payment method and then sending it to the back end, which is actually more like what we want to do. So we're going to switch things up and kind of cherry pick from this source code and change what we currently have. And so the things that we have that are the same, because we don't have to borrow everything from here, is that we have the card, right? So if we go up here and we look, we have card is equal to elements.create card with a style, card.mount, and then there's that. So then they set up their elements with this function, which is this. We already have the Stripe key. We don't need to fetch it from the back end. Publishable key, Stripe elements, return Stripe, card, client secret, data.client secret. And so then set up elements. Data has this actually set up elements right here. Returns this stuff. So then the dot then function pulls the Stripe card and client secret. Adds the event listener, pay that information. Oh, this is so annoying that they did it this way. But I'm just trying to find the link between these two tutorials so that we don't have to go rewrite a bunch of stuff. And it looks like this is it right here. Create payment method card. So we have our card. We're waiting for a change event, which then, and this needs to be tabbed out, we get the display error. If there's an event error, we go ahead and tell us the error, otherwise nothing. So basically, as the card's being typed, we just display an error. And then the form here, when the form gets submitted, that's when we confirm the card. So right here is where we would use stripe.create payment card, give ourselves some space, with first argument of card, and then we pass the card in, which mind you, we have card because we created it right here. So let's pause there, go back over here. Now they're saying, okay, you get a result, if there's a result.error, show the error. So let's just borrow this and tab it out a little bit. Okay, so this gives us a result. If there's a result error, they have a function called show error, result error.message. Mind you, we have this nice little error, card error thing right here. So we could say, select that, and instead of event.error.message, we would change it to result. So we don't have a show error function. All we have to do is just select this card errors element and then display that error message that way. And otherwise, order data.payment method ID is equal to result.payment method ID. Now order data does not exist yet. And so if you go up to the top here, you can see this is the order data. And so if we want, we can just put it anywhere is fine, really. We'll put it right after client secret. So the ID, you can just call it whatever you want. We'll call it YelpCamp registration fee with a P. Currency is United States dollar. So that's where we get order data from. So then if we select it down here, we're taking that already declared variable and it's already initialized with an object. We're adding a new property. Payment method ID is equal to the result of create payment method for the card. And we're just getting that payment method ID. So that part is important because we're going to use it on the back end. Now we're going to use fetch to hit a route called pay, which is a post route. And so over here we need to create a pay route. So we'll say post pay get checkout, just so that we're knowing exactly what's going on there. So it's a router.post/pay. I'll make it an async function. Just what the heck, why not? We'll probably end up using async code inside of here. And close it up. Okay, so now it's ready to have some stuff put in there. And just real quick, inside of pay, we've already done this results, blah, blah, blah. We're returning fetch here, and then the next thing that happens is we have two more .thens. So we'll go back to checkout.ejs. We have our .then with the result. Right here, we're just going to chain two more .thens, make sure we fix our formatting. And if you're not familiar with .then is how promises work. Thenable promises. They replace callbacks. So let me just give you a quick little insight on that. So let's say you have a .create function that you can call on something. It doesn't matter what it is. And that's an async function. So it takes some arguments and then it returns an error first callback and then some data. And so that is an example of a callback. Let me just get us set up with JavaScript real quick. Okay. It makes everything way too big. Okay. So this is an example of an async function that returns an error first callback, right? So then you can say if there's an error message, handle the error. Otherwise, do some stuff with data. And that's nice and everything, and that's probably how you learned it from the Web Developer Bootcamp. But there's a more modern approach, and that is that we can use, if it returns a thenable promise, we can use .then. And what that would look like instead is something.create args .then function data. Okay, and then so this is chainable. So depending on what data is, it could potentially return something else that's thenable, and then you just keep doing .thens. Well, the other thing you can do here is a .catch. which catches any potential error in the entire .then chain. And so then here you handle the potential error and you do something with the data. So that's what we're dealing with currently are these .thens, and what we've also seen is async await. And so what that looks like is it uses these async functions that return thenable promises, and we say let data equal to await something.create. And if we want to handle the error, which we of course should, we just use a try catch. So these are 3 examples of the exact same thing. We have a callback here. We have a slightly nicer format because with the callback, if you have another callback here or here, it's just going to keep going out and out and out and create what's called a callback tree. And then this right here, we just get these nice thenable promises that can just get chained and chained and chained. So they go vertically, they don't go out. And then we have this even nicer syntax, I think, especially if you're coming from a language like Ruby or Python, where everything is synchronously happening one function after the other. You can await the data, and then when you have it, do something with it. Otherwise, if you get an error, do something there. And instead of chaining .thens together, you can get the data. If the data returns another something else, another promise, then you can just await data, etc. So that's that. Just a quick little tutorial on .then, so you're not scratching your head thinking, what the heck is this stuff? And so create payment method returns a thenable promise, which then inside of here we return fetch, which also returns a thenable promise. So we then the result. If you're familiar with fetch, it's kind of like jQuery's AJAX request. It's also kind of like XML HTTP requests. It's just kind of a more modern approach, and it uses .then. And so what you get back first is the result. You want to get the JSON from that, so you return result.json, which is a method which then returns the response. So you get the response from that, which can potentially have an error. Again, they've got this show error or order complete. And so we are going to just borrow this, plug it in here, and it was response.error. And then the other thing is order complete. So we don't have order complete in our code. That's coming from here. If we scroll down, there's this order complete, which takes the client secret and it tells you, hey, it shows a success or error message when the payment is complete. And so in this case, yeah, you could show success or error if you want to. What I would be more interested in doing is just doing a redirect. And so we're going to get rid of the order complete. And this is where we'll do the window.location.href. And I'll just put a little comment here. It says redirect to /campgrounds with a query string that invokes a success flash message. So we'll set this equal to /campgrounds ? And I think I just said paid is equal to true or something like that. So we'll deal with that in a second, well, in a few minutes. All right, the next thing we need to do is make it to where when we send a post request to /pay with this body of JSON stringify order data object, which if you remember, we created here, and then we added on to right here. Once we send that, we got to handle it over on the server. Well, in order to handle that on the server, we have to do something special. So we go to server.js. This is their server-side code. This little line right here is really important, express.json. And so this will allow us to get the body right here. And so that's going to happen. We could just put it right here. app.use express.json right above body parser.url encoded which, mind you, in the newer versions of Express, body parser is actually part of Express. So if you're using the newest versions after like 4.16, I think, which if you remember we're using 4.17.1, you can change it to express.url encoded. Kunal, yeah, the video will be shared on my channel after we're done here. All right, so let's handle the server side. What happens when a user pays? Well, they have that code over here. It's a little crazy. So let's just copy what they have inside of this app.postPay, and then we'll kind of pick it apart and see if we can't make it a little easier to understand. And so they are using try catch, so we'll put that in there. Okay, great. All right, so the first thing they're doing is they're destructuring from rec.body. So rec.body has rec.body.items and has rec.body.currency. And so what this line right here is doing is it's saying we want the property payment method ID to be a variable. We want the property items to become a variable and the property currency to become a variable. And so if you aren't familiar with this, look up object destructuring. But basically, it's going to pull those properties from rec.body, which is an object, and it's going to assign them to these variables. So then we can use them later on down here inside of the rest of our code. So then the order amount is saying calculate the order amount. Now, we already did that with our payment intent up here. So they're doing things a little bit differently. They're creating the payment intent down inside of this. And that is why they how are they getting the key? I think they're getting the key, the secret key on the front end. So let me think about this. We don't want this amount to be affected on the front end. I'm just trying to think about this. Well, whatever. For now, what we'll do is we'll just hard code it. So we're going to say order amount is equal to 2,000, and we'll just call it amount. That way this word amount right here can just be amount. And then you'll notice currency is equal to currency. So again, we can just do that like that. Payment underscore method, payment method ID, so that's coming from up here. And then error on requires action, true, confirm, true. Create new payment ID with payment ID from payment method ID from the client. Great. All right, so then if this works, and so notice that we're awaiting the .create of the payment intents. If this intent works without getting caught by the error down here, then we know we've received the payment. And so the next thing we need to do is make sure that the user that's logged in gets their user property of is paid changed to true. And so we go up to models, user.js, and right now they just have a username and password. So we're going to create a new property here, call it is paid, and type is going to be Boolean, and the default is going to be false. And so anytime a user gets signed up, they're going to get a property is paid, which is a Boolean value of false. And what we need to do is we need to change that to true once they've successfully paid the registration fee. And so we want to make sure that this user is logged in before they do this. So we're going to pass in is logged in right here. That way we know we have access to a user. So once the payment is received, and yes, I see the error down there, we'll handle it in a second. We know we have access to rec.user. And what we want to do is find that user, which I think you can actually update the user directly from the rec.user object. We'll try that first and just see if it works, because that'll save us time of having to actually query the database. So we'll say something like rec.user.isPaid is equal to true, and then we'll just await rec.user .save, which is an asynchronous function. And so once that's done, then we're going to send the client secret, intent.client secret, back to the front end, at which point we can handle whatever needs to be handled. The other thing is, if we catch the error, we check and see if the card got declined. And if it does, then we send this card requires authentication. In order to proceed, please use a different card. So that's specific to the authentication required code. If it's anything else, we just send the simple error message. And so again, this is .send, so it's just sending text back to the fetch request that we did on the client JavaScript, and that we'll catch that in the fetch, the .catch. Actually, I think it's just inside the .then with the response.error, and then we'll just display that error on the page. And so yeah, by the way, I'm like totally hacking this together because this tutorial that we started at the beginning of the video is different than the source code from the tutorial that I did previously. So we'll see if it works. It'll be interesting to find out. All right, so at this point, if the user submits their stuff, we should be able to at least get some information as to if it worked or not. By the way, when we redirect to /campgrounds to check and see if it's paid true, let's go ahead and deal with that. So over in routes, campgrounds, this is /campgrounds because it's mounted to /campgrounds. And so the very first thing we're going to do is check and see if rec.query.paid is a thing, because unless it's in the query string, then it's not. But if it is a thing, then we're going to say res.locals.success is equal to payment succeeded, welcome to YelpCamp. And when you add something to res.locals, it immediately becomes available as an environment variable. So, or not an environment variable, sorry, a local variable. So here, res.render, when you have this second argument of a object literal that points to something, this right here on the left-hand side, the key, that is a local variable. I have a video for this in my channel. It goes over local variables in Express. So if you haven't seen it and you're unfamiliar with this, check it out. Hopefully you know what I'm talking about. But this is a variable that we can use inside the EJS view, specifically the campgrounds index view. And so the other way of creating these variables without passing them into this object right here is to simply add them to the res.locals property, which is available for the life of that request response cycle. So we're going to say res.locals.success is equal to payment succeeded, welcome to YelpCamp. Now when we have a local variable called success in our view, it gets handled by our partial over here, where it says, hey, if success exists, then go ahead and print it right here. And it gives it this nice little class that makes it look like a little flash message. So assuming that we get the paid query string, which comes from this line right here, question mark paid is equal to true, that's just a little signifier that says, hey, this is the person that's just paid. They finally are able to access the campgrounds area of the site, and we want to send them a little flash message that lets them know that their payment was successful and welcome to this locked area. Now, we're using this is logged in middleware, and we don't have access to it inside of index.js. So if we go to middleware index.js, we have middleware object.isLoggedIn, check campground ownership, check comment ownership, blah, blah, blah. So we're exporting it as middleware object from middleware index.js. So what we can do in order to get access to isLoggedIn down here in the pay route is simply say const object destructuring isLoggedIn is equal to require ./middleware, and that's it. So when you require middleware, oh sorry, it's not ./. We're inside routes, we need to go up to middleware. So if we're inside index.js, we need to go up dot dot. So we go up out of routes, and then that takes us down into middleware. Now middleware is an object that has an isLoggedIn property. So when we export the middleware object with isLoggedIn property, we can then destructure it, which again, what this does is it says, hey, isLoggedIn is a variable that now points to that isLoggedIn property on that middleware object. And now we can access the isLoggedIn middleware function anywhere inside this route. And because it is a function that accesses rec res and next, we can put it right here as a middleware inside of this route. And so all it does is it says, hey, is this person logged in? If they are, go ahead and go to the next page, or go to the next middleware function rather, which is this one. If they're not, then redirect them with a flash message that says, hey, you need to log in. So what that does for us is it makes sure that the person who's submitting the payment is someone who's logged in, but it also gives us access to rec.user, which again, I'm not 100% sure if this part's going to work. We may have to actually find the user, but if we do, we can figure that out in a second. I think rec.user, sorry, that's a typo, glad I found it. Rec.user gives us access to not just the user object, but like actually the user object that has the method.save on it. So if we modify it and then we do a .save, it should update the database directly. We will find out momentarily. Okay, so it's kind of some crazy stuff going on here because we're like I said, we're mixing these two tutorials. So at this point, we have the client secret. We have the card. We're listening for changes on the card. We listen for submit on the form. When it submits, we create the payment method, which is from the card, and then we see if there's any issue with that. If there's not, then we go ahead and pull the payment method ID from the result, and then we send a post request to pay with that data from the order data here. And so it all gets submitted to the back end where we determine how much we're going to charge the user, which is 20 bucks. Remember, 20 times 100. So then back over here, if that works, we get back JSON. We have to return the result.json, and ultimately we get a response. Now, either it worked or it didn't work. And if it didn't work, it has an error on it, which comes from this right here, res.send, and then this is the .error, or res.send, and this is the .error. So that gets handled there. Otherwise, we just send back the client secret, and that happens in the, where is it? Else, right here. And so what we can do, at this point, I don't even think we need that other client secret. So I think we can get rid of this one. Go back up to this get route for checkout. We don't even have to do the intent, any of this stuff. And so then this no longer becomes a async route. It's just a regular route that just renders checkout. Cool. And so it renders the checkout view, which then all this stuff happens in. What we could do is get the publishable key. I know how to do that, and I'll show you how to do that shortly. But for now, like I said, it is a public key, so it's okay to have it exposed, at least for the time being. So let's go ahead, and I could be wrong, but I think we're almost ready to test it. The only issue here is that with our current setup for YelpCamp, amount is not defined. Oh, right. Over in the view, we have our amount here. So in this case, we would need to hard code it, or we would need to pass it in. And so it's still fine to pass it in this way. And we would just say, this is actually really interesting. Let me think about this. So we could pass it in like this, right? But then we have to change it here. And what we could do instead is we could say something like delete rec.session.amount, and then just in case there's already an amount on there, and then rec.session amount is equal to 2000. And let me think about this. Then we would be pulling it from here. Just wondering if it's even worth our time to do it that way. It's probably not. Okay, so in this case, I'm just going to put it here and here. So you just have to remember to change it in 2 spots. And you can do it any way you want. in the real world, you'd probably like be checking out products. So you'd want to pull from the actual product and figure out what the price of a specific product is. And that goes into a whole nother type of tutorial. This is a specific one-time fee. And so I could show you, maybe if there's time after the tutorial, one way to just put it in one place. And maybe you could even potentially store it in the database if you want to. There's a lot of stuff you could do above and beyond this tutorial that we're probably not going to do just because of time. We're already going on almost 2 hours. But let's go ahead and continue on. All right, so if we refresh, this should work. It tells me pay 2,000, which, oops, it should be pay 20. There we go. Refresh. Okay, pay $20. Good. So let's open up this. The accept the payment tutorial has test your integration, so they actually have card numbers that you can test. So here's the version that requires authentication, and this of course is going to throw an error. And so if we go back to YelpCamp and we just plug that in, and then you just put any random valid, so like January of 2022, just put some random numbers here. And so then you try to pay the $20. It says your postal code is incomplete. Okay, cool. It's good to know that that works. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. Pay the $20. All right, client secret. Oh, interesting. Where is this code coming from? I think I forgot to take it out. Checkout. Yeah, my bad. So I left all this stuff in here. Now let me figure out where it ends. Okay. Refresh. And let's test it again. All right, so this is where they would want you to have the spinning wheel, because at this point the client's like, wait, what's going on? It's not telling me anything. And so we're just kind of like stuck here trying to figure out, okay, did the payment go through? Is there an issue? So at this point, depending on when these errors came in, these could be, let's go ahead and clear them and start over. All right, so right now, we don't have any errors. We can just go ahead and clear this. Okay. And pay. And immediately, this is not getting handled properly, but we're getting an issue with the JSON that's coming back. Okay. And so the submit is happening. Let's go debugger here. Debugger here. And debugger here, and see if we can figure out where this error is coming from. Now I need to go borrow that card number again. All right, so here's the issue. We are not logged in. So we didn't have anything in here in place to handle that, but you can see here the URL is login, and then we got redirected, right? And so of course, when you get redirected, what happens is it's sending back it's sending back an HTTP request with HTML for a page that it's trying to load, and we're expecting JSON to come back. And so let me just get rid of these real quick and go back over to. So what happened was we submitted a fetch to here. It checked to see if we were logged in. We weren't logged in, and we didn't handle what would happen if we weren't logged in. Now we do need to be logged in, because then otherwise we don't have access to the user. Of course, the checkout needs and is logged in too, because that will help mitigate even needing to check for that error. It sent this fetch right here, and then result, this is where we would there's a way to handle this better, and that is to go check the middleware. Is logged in. It's saying, hey, if you're authenticated, go ahead and go to the next middleware. Otherwise, redirect you. But we didn't check to see if the request was coming from Ajax. Because if it is, then we need to handle the response differently. So we can just send an error and we can just say need to log in, or make it a little more succinct, login required. So again, this if request.xhr is just checking to see if the request was from Ajax, and if it was, then we do not handle it this way. Now, this will get run if we don't put a return right here, so that's really important. So we'll put return res.send, and then we just do a little error message here. That'll go back to the front end. This will not get run if it's not an XHR request. So this will not mess up the is-logged-in middleware for all of our other routes that are using it, but it'll handle it appropriately for this specific route. And so, by the way, if you're still here and watching, go ahead and sound off in the live chat and just let me know if you can hear me okay. So then here is where we would potentially be handling the error, but we might also be able to do it in a .catch. So we'll put this in here real quick and just see what we end up with. So it's funny that now it's sending me to the login page. Okay. So the reason it's doing that is because I tried to go to checkout. You need to be logged in to do that. So I need to take that out real quick so we can finish testing this. Okay, so then we're going to go to the checkout console, get rid of all these pre-existing error messages, and we'll go to, doesn't matter, just whatever's valid, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we pay, and check it out. It is actually looks like it got all the way to the final response. That's interesting. Oh, this hasn't been updated with the .catch, so we have to refresh. This server should have restarted, but just to be sure, do a hard refresh so that we know the code is appropriate. So if we look at the source real quick and look at checkout, you can see it's still getting the old checkout code, which is annoying. Checkout should give us this .catch down here. So let me just try it in a incognito window. See what we get there. All right, so let's paste this in. Pay. Yay, there's our .catch. So it says syntax error, unexpected token in the it's still giving this the same error as before, which is annoying. So what might be, that's interesting. Where's the middleware? We're checking if it's request XHR. Let me just jump over to my other source code real quick and check my middleware and make sure I didn't do it differently over there. The page I'm looking at is not on the screen, so you won't see what I'm looking at. Alright, we're going to do this a different way. So we're going to plug locus in. We need to install it first. npm i locus. Then we'll run npm run dev. So we plugged in eval require locus. This is just going to freeze up the middleware when it gets invoked. And so now if we refresh this page, and I still have the card number, great. So we'll pay, and if we go back over here, now we're inside locus. If we check rec.xhr, that's interesting. It's not false. So let's look at the request object real quick. I guess fetch doesn't use XHR the way I thought it did. So we're going to find out what the alternative is. I think it's because we changed the headers. Could be wrong. And so what we probably should do instead is so remember up here we said content type application JSON. Let me see if I can find that real quick. There it is, application JSON content type. So maybe we can figure it out that way. Let's try it. what's going on. We need to exit, refresh. Start over. Come on. That's weird. Oh, somehow that got added back in. Oh, that's annoying. Alright, let's try it again. Let me go grab that card info real quick. Oops. Okay, so then right here we look at rec, and then I think it's just headers, rec, headers, content type. Sweet. So then over in the checkout, where is it? Middleware. Inside of is logged in, instead of saying rec.xhr, we'll say if rec headers content type is equal to application /JSON, then we know that the request is the one that came from this particular fetch. So then we send login required. So see if that works. So we'll refresh. This is like a super edge case since I'm being pretty anal about it, but it's important to like handle all potential security exploitable issues like this. So now if we pay, it says login required. Sweet. Now, mind you, you would never be at this page to see that unless you were able to hack past it in some way, because when we go back over here and we put is logged in for the get route and we refresh, you need to be logged in to do that. So you can't even get over there. So then we sign up, username, password. Come on. Alright, so it says welcome to YelpCamp, but then it redirected me to what? Oh yeah, so this is an issue. If you go to here, the router.post register, Colt has res.render register, which is incorrect. It's res.redirect, and then it's /register. So if there's an error when you're registering, you have to flash the error and redirect back to the register page. Otherwise, you have to send a second request, and that's not how it should be. So we'll go ahead and log in. This user should be valid now. Great. So then it takes me straight to campgrounds, which is problematic, right? Because if the user's not if the user is not paid, then they shouldn't be able to go to campgrounds. So let's create a new middleware. And let's call this one is paid. And so get rid of that. If the user's logged in, which they need to be logged in for this to work. In fact, we can just put this after and is logged in middleware, I'm pretty sure. Let me think about how this is going to work. Yeah, I think it'll work the way I'm wanting it to. We'll figure that out in a second. So, assuming that the user's already logged in, we should be able to say if rec.user.isPaid. And remember, this is either going to be true or false. So you could explicitly say is equal to true, but because it's a Boolean, the if statement is checking to see whatever the expression is true or false. So we are going to check and see if that value is true or false. If it's true, which at this point it shouldn't be, then all you have to do, you don't even have to go, you can just say return next on the same line and invoke it. Always make sure you invoke next, otherwise you just end up in, it's just going to keep loading the page forever and ever. All right, so then that will stop right in its tracks. If you're paid, then you just go to the next page, no problem. If you're not paid, then you're going to say, please finish or complete registration process, something like that. Let's just be explicit. Please pay registration fee before continuing. Something like that, and then it'll take you to /checkout. All right, so this is middleware is paid. So now over in our routes, in the index, we're not using is paid. What we're doing is once you get signed up, if there's an error, flash the error, redirect to register, it logs you in, and then it's going to redirect you to the checkout page, because that's the next step in the registration. And so it's going to say, welcome to YelpCamp user.username. It's going to send you the checkout. Okay. For the login, once you're done logging in, it'll send you to /campgrounds. Now, what we're going to do is over in campgrounds, we want to make sure that the user is, we want to make sure that the user is paid before we let them see any of these routes. So you can't look at them, you can't create them, you can't do any of that stuff unless you are a paid user. So in here we have check campground ownership a couple of times, and it's on the middleware object. So we're going to update that syntax to just be check campground ownership. And so you're wondering, okay, well, and then we also have middleware.isLoggedIn on one of these. So we're going to get rid of that. It's actually in a couple of places. So we're going to find all the places where it is. It's only in 2 places. Get rid of it. And then the check campground ownership is only on a couple of routes. But what we do there is, remember the destructuring? So we say let, and then we open up the destructuring, and we say we want to pull check campground ownership. I don't know why I'm having trouble saying that. Otherwise, also we want to pull is logged in, and we also want to pull is paid from middleware. And so now we can use check campground ownership on those other places where we changed it. Great. Now the other thing we want to do is, before any of these routes get invoked, we want to pass in router.use, and we want to do is logged in, and then I could be wrong, but I think we can also do is paid on all of these. And so then let's just copy this, because we're going to have to reuse it. First, before we do that, let's test it out. So this, we're already on campgrounds. Let's refresh. It says you need to be logged in to do that. Okay, fine. So then I log in, and login takes me, see what happened? Login tried to take me to campgrounds, but campgrounds, now it said, oh, you are logged in. That's good. Next step, are you paid? I wasn't. So it forwarded me back to checkout and said, please pay your registration fee before continuing. So I go to the landing page, which is allowed, and I say, oh, I'm going to go to the campgrounds again. And it's like, no, you have to pay. You have to have a successful payment before you can view the campgrounds. Okay, and then if you watch the sign up process again, here's a user that signs up. The moment they sign up successfully, it says, welcome to YelpCamp EN2, but it takes you to the checkout page. And so now you have to do this. If you try to skip around it and you go over here and try to view campgrounds, it says, no, you have to pay your registration fee. So that is all working how we want it to for the campgrounds. And then the comments, it checks if you're logged in before you can post a comment. You can't post a comment on a campground page unless you're paid. You can't see the campground page, which is where the comment form is living, unless you're paid. Unless I think You actually can, because you could, if you were somehow able to figure out the ID of a comment, which would be really difficult, then you could potentially hack your way into creating comments even if you're not paid. So just to really cover all of our ends here, let's go ahead and plug this in, get rid of this var middleware here, because now we're using this one here. Now we don't have check campground ownership anymore, we have check comment ownership. And just to confirm that, we can select it and then go to wherever we have it here. Now we're not using middleware dot, so we're going to select all these and get rid of the middleware dot part. So what we end up with is check comment ownership. Okay, and then there's still these middleware dot is logged ins, a couple of them. So you can get rid of all those, because what we're about to do is going to fix that. And so just make sure we didn't break anything here. Good. So then we're saying check if you're logged in on every single route and check if you're paid. And so now we'd have to have some campgrounds to test that on, so we'll test it in a minute. But the next thing to do is to try and sign someone up try to get them paid, right? Okay, so I logged in, and immediately upon logging in, it tried to redirect me to campgrounds, but it said, hey, this person's not paid yet. So let's go ahead and make sure that they're paid. So there's a test credit card that you can use for Stripe. It's 4242 4242 4242 4242, and then you can just keep going on 424242 all the way to the very end. And so then we try to pay, and this is kind of our moment of truth here. Boom, payment succeeded, welcome to YelpCamp. And guess what, now we have access. There's that little paid true up there. That's what got us the payment succeeded message. Mind you, if I just got rid of that, by the way, and went to campgrounds, then that flash message disappears. And so you could go to it like that and it would pop up, but it doesn't matter, it doesn't change anything. But that is specific to someone who is just paid. That's the only time they'll ever see that flash message. But now they have access to /campgrounds. They can go add a new campground. And they can go to that campground. They can add a new comment. And there's that new comment, okay? And that's all because they're a paid user. So let's go look at that in the database real quick. And so with our MongoD server running, we can open up Mongo and use YelpCamp version 11 Stripe. And then we can show our collections. Okay, I must be in the wrong database. Hold on. What? Oh, there's a thingamajig. Yelp_camp. There we go. Show collections. So we have a campground that got created, a comment that got created, and we have a user, two users. So if we do db.users.find.pretty, just to make it look a little bit nicer to look at here, we can see that Ian is paid true because I successfully paid. And then the other one, Ian2, is paid false. This Ian2 is not paid yet. Okay, and that's the difference between a paid user and a not paid user, and it's really as simple as that. And so if you want, close this up, you can go to your dashboard when it's in test mode. Again, once you sign up, you go to your dashboard, you go down to developers right here, and then you go to API keys and you switch it over to test data. So then you see your test data, and there's that $20 right there from today. All this other stuff is from other tests that I did. So there's that $20 that this user just paid. Pretty cool, right? And of course, ideally, once you get this on a real website, that would be $20 actual dollars minus fees and taxes and all that. But yeah, that's how you test to make sure it works. Okay, so we're not completely done yet. We still have some little things that we need to test out and figure out. So let's see here. What else do we need to do to make sure this is working exactly how we want it to? First of all, I have some debuggers in here. If there's an error that it needs to be handled properly, notice this is not dry. So we're going to go create a function for handling errors. We'll just create it at the very top, that's fine. We'll just call it error handler, which takes in an error. And what it does is we get access to display error when the page first loads. And then display error, I think it's .text content is equal to the error. And so in this case, all we have to do is say error handler, and then pass in the message. And then on this next one, error handler, pass in an empty string. And so this takes the error and it says display error.text content is equal to the error. And that's it. But because we're using this multiple times, we want to have it like that so we don't have to keep rewriting it, because then down here, same thing happens. We say handle the error, pass in result error.message. And then we go down here and we have another error situation happening right here. Pass in response.error. And then the last one here, we say error handler. I think this is going to be error.error. Could be wrong. And so for all these, it should do the error handling properly. So we can go test it real quick. So if we go log in, this is assuming that these changes to the client side EJS were actually caught by the server. It was like caching it a minute ago, which is really annoying. So we can figure out if it got it by going to password. What's going on? Okay. So if we take a look at sources and we go to page, checkout, yeah, it looks like it got updated. Yay. So then we'll go get this. We'll get this one. We haven't tested this one yet. So we'll copy that and put in some information here and pay. And so your card has insufficient funds. That's working. Great. Okay, let's try another one. Let's do 1, 2, 3, 4. Pay. Your postal code is incomplete. Let's do another one. This one doesn't even tell you. It just highlights it red, which is fine. Or like we leave that out when we try to pay. Like these things are pretty obvious. And then the other one would be this card right here. And so then we just need a valid year. Oh, and it's, of course you need a CVC. This makes this red. Okay, pay. This card requires authentication in order to proceed. Please use a different card. And then what we had a little while ago, if we go back over here to index, go down to checkout, remove is logged in. So just assume that somehow the user is able to get to the checkout page without actually being logged in. And so then we enter some card info and we submit it, and it says login required. Okay. And we don't have to do anything crazy. We could redirect if we want to the login page, but that person's not supposed to be there to begin with. So it's nice that we're doing them a favor and saying like, hey, caught you need to log in first, but we don't have to do them any major favors. So log in. Let me put that back in there. And by the way, right here, if the user is, we can just do a quick check because we already know they're logged in. So we can say if rec.user.is paid, right, then they don't need to be here. And so then we'll return res.redirect to /campgrounds. And we can even give them a little flash success, so it doesn't have to be an error message or anything like that. And we could say your account is already paid. Otherwise, we render the checkout. And so then we refresh this page. You need to be logged in. Okay, fine. I'll log in with the user that's already got the proper credentials here. And so if I try to just manually go to checkout for whatever reason, it says, hey, your account's already paid. You don't need to do that. Okay, fine. So then I go back over here to EN2, log this user in, and now it's telling me, hey, you need to pay the registration fee before continuing. Okay, fine. So we put in some valid credit card information, and we pay. And this is the last thing that I would do, is create a little spinning wheel so you know what the heck's going on, so the user's not like, oh, it's not working, and then they push it multiple times. You also need to disable that submit button. After you hit it once, you need to disable it. That way they don't resubmit the form. So yay, payment succeeded. Welcome to YelpCamp. So there's more that can be done. We're going on 2 hours and 15 minutes. You need the spinning wheel when a user submits the payment while you're waiting for the payment to go through. That way they know that something is happening, and they don't try to close the page while the payment's still going through or whatever. You also need to stop the form from submitting or whatever. So, you know what? I was going to say let's do it another time because I'm tired, but let's go ahead and do it now. So, over in checkout.ejs, first and foremost, let's go ahead and make our lives a little bit easier. Everything inside this script right here, let's move into its own script, okay? And so we'll say script source is equal to, and then this will be inside of public, and we'll create a new folder here. We'll call it scripts, and then a new file, and we'll call it stripe. Let's not call it stripe because we don't want to get confused with the CDN. Let's call it registration.js, or it's on the checkout page. Sorry, I'm like all over the place. Let's call it checkout.js. And we'll paste all of our JavaScript code in here. And the formatting may have got a little funky. Yeah, it did. But whatever. So then over here, it's because this is using like 2 spaces and the other one's using 4. We're going to go to /scripts/checkout.js. And then, of course, move that like that. Okay, so now it should be bringing that script in. And yeah, that should be good for that. So that'll help us kind of separate things out a little bit. Now, if you think that I am going to write my own loading wheel, you're crazy because I don't want to do that. So what we're going to do is borrow from these guys. So we're going to go over to, again, this is Stripe samples GitHub. They've got the client, and inside the script, they have the show error thing, change loading state. Yeah, so let's borrow this, show a spinner on payment submission, and let's just bring it down here to the bottom and plug it in. And yeah, the spacing's definitely messed up on this stuff, which is annoying because my tabs are clearly 4 spaces, but I'm not going to get too wound up about it because all this right here is 2 spaces. There's a way to fix it, but I'm not familiar with the commands on VS Codium, so I'd have to look that up, and I'm not going to bother doing that right now. So that's that change loading state function. If you get an error, then you change the loading state to false. We already have our little error handler up here, so we'll do that first. Also, this is a function. They're using var. I'll just say function change loading state is loading. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Order complete. This is when this is where we're doing our redirect, which happens right here. So yeah, you could change the loading state if you want to before we do the redirect. I don't think the user's going to catch it that that happens, but we'll see. All right, so this is saying button disable true when it's loading. And it's just selecting the only button on the page. And then spinner, classless, remove, hidden, classless, add, hidden, spinner, button, text. So let's go look at this. Spinner, where is that? It's going to be in the form. So we'll go web, it's probably in the index.html. Here we go. So you have your button ID, submit, class, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so we'll just borrow this. Go over to checkout. We have our button right here. Let's just compare the similarities. So the only difference is that we have a class on ours, and then our text is different. Like that. So we'll get rid of the old one. So here we have this button, class spinner, hidden. The spinner starts out as hidden. And then there's probably some CSS stuff in here that we need to bring in. So we'll go client, web, CSS, global.css, spinner, yeah. So assuming this works, it says to do, spinner processing state, errors and animations. So I don't know if this spinner's working or not. But we'll find out. Animated form, we're not doing any of that. Hidden is display none. You know what, just for the heck of it, I'm gonna borrow, because their form looks pretty nice. So I'm gonna borrow this entire file. And we'll go no, that's not what I want. What? Reveal on Finder. Oh, that's weird. That was meant to be here. Yeah. So there we go. I was wondering why that was like together. All right, so public, we have scripts, we'll check out, and then we have style sheets, we have main, so we'll create a new file inside style sheets. We'll call it global.css, I think is what they called it. Plug these in. No. Formatting's messed up, but it's fine. I'm not going to think to fix it. You can hopefully just do that. Nope, that messed it up again. All right, whatever. I'm just going to leave it how it is. So we bring in the CSS, which means we also need to borrow their form. And so then we go to web, index.html, and basically it would be everything inside of body tag. And so we need to maintain at least this ID of card errors. And so right beneath the H3, I'm just going to give myself some space, put this new code in here. And okay, there's actually is ID card errors, which is good. And then this right here, this div, we're not using that. I don't think. So I'm going to leave it out for now. What was the ID on it? SR result. I think that's good. So then payment form, and then they have card element, right? Card element. Okay, so this has everything that we need. Let's get rid of this. And it's inside of, well, I'm interested to see what the styling ends up being because we combined it with Bootstrap. All right, so we'll go ahead and sign up for a new user so we can get to that page. It says, welcome to YelpCamp. That's interesting. Oh, we didn't bring the style sheet in. So in checkout.ejs in the header, so this is interesting. This particular file needs to have this right here. It also needs to have, where did I put it? This right there. So in the header, technically we could put the link inside of checkout.ejs and it would work, but that's kind of sketch. It's not proper syntax. So what we'll do is we'll copy this, create a new partial, we'll call it checkout header. Of course we got to give it a .ejs extension. And the difference here is that we have another file here called global. And so then we can actually go to header and get rid of this Stripe version 3 deal. And then we can go to the footer. Footer's fine, we just leave the footer how it is. So we just need this new header. So that's the old header that the other pages use. Here's the new header with the global.css. So then we go to checkout.ejs and we just change it to checkout-header inside this partial. So if we refresh the page, oh, look at that. So it gives us this nicely styled little diddly down here. But the problem is it's inside of, it looks like we are having some conflicts. So let me see. No, that's fine. Call medium 4 is going to be too small, so let's do call medium 6 with an offset of 3. So call medium dash offset dash 3, call medium 6, refresh. Cool, that gives us enough space. There's a lot of space right here. Let's figure out what the heck that's about. It's probably inside the global. I think it's vertically centered. It's this SR root class in global. Yeah, it's using Flexbox and it's using justify content center height auto. So let's see what happens when we take height auto. Which one of these? You know, it really doesn't matter. Not that worried about it. But what I will do is I'll take the H3 here and put it right above SR main. Let's try that. Nope. Put it down here above the form. There we go. Cool. All right, so when this page loads, it kind of loads it down in what can be considered the center. You can see that it gives you a little bar here. If you want to mess with the Flexbox styling, feel free to. I really don't care to do any further styling. So that's nice that we got it like this. Let's just test it to see if the error messages are working the way that they were previously. So let me click pay. This card requires authentication. Great. Try another one. Submit. Your card has insufficient funds. Great. Try it with, okay, so that breaks. That breaks as well. And then we try it with not enough numbers for the zip code, your postal code. Okay, so the error messages are working. The pay somehow. Are we still using the amount? There we go, pay $20. Great. So let's test this out and see if the loading animation occurs. So we have this new user, Ian3, and there should be a loading spinner somewhere. And I'm not seeing it, and it's still redirected. So, interesting. Oh, I think I know why. If we go to checkout, oh, we're not. So if we go to, let's close CSS. Where's my script? Public script checkout.js. When we send the fetch is when we need to be doing client web. It's going to be inside the script.js. So Okay. When the page first loads, we're going to disable the button. So let's do that up here. They put it right after the order data. So disable the button until the stripe's set up on the page. That's fine. Stripes, I think, is already set up by default with what we're doing because we're not doing this setup elements thing. But either way, let's see here. 1, 2. Those are the only 2 places. Chunky. Oh yeah. So we're not doing that. We can get rid of that. But what we do want to do is when we pay something in here. There it is. Right inside of pay, we have this change loading state to true. And so right here, stripe.create payment method is where we change the loading state to true. So that should get us our spinner, fingers crossed. And the other thing, yeah, it disables the button. Yeah. This should be good. Let's try it. EN4, nope, that's login. Let's go to sign up. EN4, password. And so it takes me here. And we want to do a use the one that's supposed to work for us. All right, moment of truth. There it is, the spinning wheel. If you saw it, it was on the green button. It wasn't that exciting, but it was spinning. So that kind of like tells the user, hey, something is happening. Also, I think it disabled the button from being able to be clicked. It didn't change the styling of it, but I think if I had tried to click it, it probably would have disabled it. Yeah, and now payment succeeded. Welcome to YelpCamp again. You can go back to your dashboard and see we have $80 divided by 20. So we have 4 different people that have signed up, and that is accurate. We have Ian, EN1, or EN2, EN3, and EN4. The only other thing I would change on this particular app is just the login page and the register page. And I'm actually just going to borrow that from my other version of this tutorial, the one that I posted yesterday, which this, well, I mean, you could do it either way, but this is essentially the same. So YelpCamp Stripe payment, I'll probably just update this repo with the source code that we have here. Views, let's go to register, copy that. I'll walk through what I'm doing here just so you know, but see, this is just a little H1 sign up. You have your form. There's no Bootstrap in here. It's, Colt didn't get that far. So when you go to, yeah, you can see it's kind of simple. So we just paste this over. We give ourselves a container, a row with text center, call medium 12, and that's pretty much it. We have another link down here to the login page just in case you already have an account. And then the other thing would be the login page, which is essentially the same thing, except it would send you back to the registration page if you already if you did not have an account. And so just to show you what that looks like, we can refresh. I just centered it. It's still not beautiful. These inputs right here need to be form control. So that would be something like class is equal to form control. And then the inputs also need a class. Remember we were messing with that a little while ago? Oh, sorry, form group. My bad. Form group. And then I think the inputs get class equals form control, I think. And then type value login class is equal to button primary. Whoop. It's not that one. Yeah, that's one way to do it. This call medium 12 would probably be better if it was like call medium offset 3, call medium 6. Makes it a little bit smaller. Anyway, you could do whatever you want to make it look nicer. I have some other tutorials for migrating to Bootstrap 4. Feel free to, follow up this live session with that pre-recorded tutorial. You can find it here on my YouTube channel. We can do the same thing here by on the registration page. So again, this would change to that. This would change to that. Oops. And then we would get ourselves a class is equal to, I don't have an equal sign on my keyboard, the button. I just have like where the button should go. So I have to like just push where the button would go and hope that it gives me an equal sign. There it is. Alright, we're almost done here, y'all. So yeah, it's not beautiful. You need margins and stuff, but that's the login page. Need an account. Here's a sign up page. At least it's centered. And then just to test, make sure it still works. Oops, real quick before we do that, let's just make sure that this button has class equal to, God, I think I have the equal sign. Button, primary. Cool. And so then we can do EN5, password, sign up. Says, hey, make sure you do your registration. Again, if you want this to be further up, just go change the flex box for it. Just testing this to make sure we can log in. We log in. It tells us we still need to pay. Here's that form. Great. All right, that is it. I'm going to push this to GitHub, put all the links for all this different stuff. I saw somebody said that they couldn't find the GitHub for the Stripe sample. I will link that in the description for this video, so here in like 30 to 45 minutes when the video is live, you will be able to see that. Let me check through the comments real quick, make sure I don't need to answer anything. Somebody's asking me to reply to a comment on my last community post. I can look into that. Thank you for all the nice comments, everyone. Appreciate that. This video will be available after here in a minute. And yeah, I'm glad I'm motivating some of you. No problem. The video will not be deleted. I do not, so consider migrating YelpCamp to use React. Probably not entirely, but you can use React inside of EJS. So like I have the whole entire class for using jQuery's Ajax, and while that's great and everything, using jQuery obviously is kind of dated. If you want to be like on the cutting edge and up to speed with everything, you would use React. But you don't have to overhaul your complete application to use React. You can plug React in with server-side rendering. So if you want to server-side render with a template engine like EJS or Handlebars, you could use React on top of that. So I might explore some tutorials for that. But I wouldn't do like a complete overhaul on, at least not right now, maybe in the future, but not a complete overhaul on YelpCamp is what I was going to say. For anyone that's still here, there is Super Chat enabled, so if you feel like you want to fill my coffee cup, that would be appreciated. Obviously, this is free, so no pressure there, but donations are very welcome. Help support the channel and keep things like this going. So I'm going to put this on GitHub, and yeah, hope everybody enjoyed this, and let me know what you want to do for the next video. Thanks a lot. Somebody asked, when will we get a Socket.io tutorial? I don't know. I have that one source code. Actually, I'll pull it up right now. User notifications. I think this is it. No, this might be the original user notifications. Or maybe I updated this one. It's somewhere in here. Where is it? Notification. That's not it. I used that, oh, what's it called? Pusher. But I don't know if this is the one. It doesn't look like it. Anyway, I had put that out there, the source code for it. And it uses sockets. But yeah, I'm not sure. As far as the socket.io tutorial, I don't have anything prepared for that right now. I could look into it potentially. But I might do a tutorial, a video tutorial for the source code for that pusher app here eventually. All right, so I'm going to, how do I do this? I'm going to do get status git add Alright, so what I just did, replaced the previous push that I had up here, and this should now contain everything you need. The example.env is what you're going to do. You're going to bring in your publishable test keys, secret key from Stripe dashboard, and then package.json should have all the updated stuff in here that you need. I have that DevScript if you want to do npm run dev, and just do npm install to get .env and everything else that's in here. So you should be able to test it right away if you want to, and then of course you could like try to do it on your own or whatever. But yeah, that's the updated source code, and I'll get everything else included in the video description. All right, thanks everybody. Catch you all on the flip flap.